Right now on Currents News, last legs, a look at businesses in Chinatown as they continue to struggle 1 year into the pandemic. Capitol riots, new developments on the investigation and arrests. 10 years later, how the Middle East and Christian community are coping a decade after the Arab Spring. And border crisis, why Customs and Border Protection is calling in reinforcements. Johnson & Johnson shots getting in the arms of Americans today. The goal, 20 million doses by the end of March. But some Catholics are questioning whether the vaccines are morally sound. More on that in a moment. But New York City's mayor says he's getting one.
I plan on getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. I want to show people it's the right choice.
Health officials say the initial shipment of the newly approved vaccine could arrive in New York City as soon as Wednesday or Thursday, and the plan to get a majority of the shots to homebound seniors. But what about the rest of Americans still struggling? President Biden is huddling with Senate Democrats, hoping to ramp up efforts to get his $1.9 trillion relief package passed. The bill, which includes stimulus checks, small business aid, and funding for schools, could get to the floor as early as Wednesday. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. That aid couldn't come soon enough for small businesses struggling to stay open. Emily Drewby was in Chinatown speaking with business owners who are dealing with another problem as well, hate.
A steady stream of customers come into HING Bakery, the busyness a relief to Liz Yee, especially when she reflects on what it was like this time last year.
You saw everybody close their gates, and then a couple months after, you saw for rent signs, for sale signs.
This bakery has been in her family for 3 generations. They shut down for 8 months during the pandemic, focusing on their other spot, Tony's Fresh Rice Noodle. It's been rough, a year later, and things are finally starting to look up.
We're making enough to cover us right now, so for me, that's a win right now. Chinatown slowly is getting back to where it is, but not completely.
This has become the norm for Chinatown. Pre-pandemic, there were about 312 eateries. That dropped to 29 in April. A quick walk down the sidewalk, and it's clear that's getting better, but it's still far from normal. A recent survey done by on-the-ground group Chinatown Partnership showed only about 55% of ground floor stores in the area are back open.
For many of these business owners, there has been a bright spot, people coming to their aid from their neighbors around the corner to across the globe.
The good sign is obviously so many people wanted to help, and so many supporters, so many donors.
However, now another ugly virus has reared its head. Racism. Attacks against people of Asian descent are on the rise.
We've definitely seen a lot more fear, especially within the workers.
Wellington says Asian Americans make up about 14% of New York City, and that it's up to the rest of the city to help.
I need the other 86% to speak up, to intervene safely, right? To distract, to de-escalate, to document.
Another way to help the area in their journey to recovery, tourism.
You don't have the kind of foot traffic. And I think a lot of the restaurants are now relying more on takeout and delivery, which is helpful, but it's not enough.
From politicians like New York City Council member Margaret Chin to business owners like Liz Yee, many saying the best way to help is to show up. In Manhattan's Chinatown, Emily Drewby, Currents News.
Hate crimes against Asian Americans are spiking in New York City. The NYPD is reporting 29 racially motivated attacks against people of Asian descent last year. 24 of them were attributed to coronavirus motivation. That's compared to just 3 attacks overall in 2019. Calls for Andrew Cuomo's resignation are intensifying as a 3rd woman accuses the New York governor of unwanted advances. In a New York Times article, Anna Rook says Cuomo put his hands on her cheeks at a wedding reception in 2019 and asked if he could kiss her. Rook is the first woman who didn't work for Cuomo to make an accusation against the governor. Cuomo has yet to respond to Rook's allegations. Over on Capitol Hill, FBI Director Christopher Wray faced Congress for the first time since the riots on January 6th.
That siege was criminal behavior plain and simple, and it's behavior that we, the FBI, view as domestic terrorism.
His comments come as the investigation into the attack gains momentum. Brian Todd has more.
Suspects in the January 6th attack on the Capitol are under more pressure than ever, with over 300 people charged, more than 280 arrested, and law enforcement tracking many more.
The investigation into those responsible is moving at a speed and scale that's unprecedented, and rightly so. Those responsible must be held to account, and they will be.
Do it again and we'll spray you back.
Thomas Caldwell, an alleged leader of the far-right anti-government paramilitary group the Oath Keepers, pleaded not guilty. Caldwell is one of 9 alleged associates of the Oath Keepers charged with conspiracy. Prosecutors say he discussed bringing weapons across the Potomac River into Washington by boat on or before January 6th. And Dominic Pizzola, an alleged associate of the extremist group the Proud Boys, seen here breaking a window at the Capitol with a police shield, appeared before a federal judge as well. Prosecutors told the judge today they've gathered new evidence that the Proud Boys were communicating by radio on January 6th, that Pizzola ordered a radio ahead of that date and was trying to make sure it worked around that time. Pizzola's lawyer said it doesn't mean he was taking or giving orders during the riot. Pizzola has pleaded not guilty and is now trying to distance himself from the Proud Boys. Meanwhile, an independent review of security around the Capitol, conducted by retired Lieutenant General Russell Honore, could be released in the coming days. A draft of a proposal recommends building an integrated system of walls and fences around the Capitol, and adding more than 1,000 more officers to the U.S. Capitol Police Force, as well as establishing a quick reaction force to avoid bureaucratic delays in deploying police in an emergency, like we saw on January 6th.
That was Brian Todd reporting. The review also found more officers are needed to protect members of Congress when they're in their home districts and not in Washington. Now for more on that big question tonight, is the new vaccine developed by Johnson & Johnson morally sound, and should Catholics get it? John Brehany with the National Catholic Bioethics Center spoke to us about these concerns and how the third vaccine is actually derived from aborted fetal cells.
It can be ethical to use these vaccines, and of course it can be good to be vaccinated. And at the same time, I think Catholics will want to find effective ways to expressing their opposition and to reducing their dependence on the use of these cell lines.
While Brehany emphasizes immunization is important for the common good, he also encourages Catholics to look into alternatives and to voice opposition to the future use of fetal cell lines. Ethicists and the Vatican have said that both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are ethically uncontroversial. The U.S. Bishops' Working Group on President Biden has officially wrapped up. Archbishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles made the announcement this morning, outlining the group's recommendations for a better working relationship. First, the USCCB plans to send a letter to the president, clarifying topics the conference strongly supports and acknowledging they won't agree on certain policies. The second proposes a document outlining coherence to the Eucharist for all Catholics. U.S. Customs and Border Patrol is sending reinforcements to the southern border. Since President Biden took office, there has been a spike in arrests and unaccompanied minors arriving at the border with Mexico. Approximately 2,200 people crossed the border each week in February. The Pope leaves for Iraq Friday. He will be entering a country torn apart by ISIS militants and meet with people emotionally scarred by years of destruction.
I have seen how they destroyed the churches, the historical sites, how they executed people, how they looted the houses of the Christian people in Mosul, how they deported them. I have seen all of these horrors.
Omar Mohammed, a blogger from the Middle East who documented much of ISIS's destruction, says the Holy Father's trip will be groundbreaking, helping to heal the Christian population. According to the papal charity Aid to the Church in Need, an organization that has spearheaded the rebuilding of devastated cities, 1,200 Christians were killed between 2003 and March of 2015 alone. The numbers of Christians in Iraq has also decreased from around 1 to 1.4 million by the Second Gulf War to around 300 to 400,000. Coming up, we will speak with a member of Aid to the Church in Need. Her work has brought her face to face with devastation in the Middle East. Regina Lynch will join us in just a moment. While the Pope spends part of his Lent in Iraq, we are marking the season here. The Diocese of Brooklyn is making it easy for you to do that virtually. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has more.
The days leading up to Easter, the most holy day of the year, are a time of preparation and reflection. Since last Easter, our faith has endured some unprecedented changes. But this Lent, the Diocese of Brooklyn is adapting to the pandemic age.
For everyone that's still at home, and as we're still dealing with the pandemic, we just wanted to make it the best Lent yet for people in ways that we could.
For resources. Caitlin Sack-Dallin is the social media community manager for DeSales Media Group, the communication and technology arm of the Diocese of Brooklyn that operates Net TV. DeSales created a Lent 2021 website as a hub for everything you need for a meaningful Lenten season.
Prayer is conversation with God.
Video reflections in English and Spanish for each of the 3 pillars of Lent, diocese-wide and parish information, and a virtual retreat are all meant to guide Catholics through the season.
There's different practices going on, whether it's the Archdiocese or our diocese, church to church. And so we're really encouraging people to come to the website for information.
The fastest way to grow in holiness is through fasting.
When we think about Lent, we often see it as a time to give something up, but the website offers an explanation of fasting from a different perspective.
Why do we fast? Even though we have many good things, that we have a God who is greater.
These days, one of those good things have been the devices we use to communicate when we can't see each other. The website has Facebook filters and wallpapers to keep the day centered around faith.
We give people these daily meaningful reminders as a way to actually engage in their faith.
So whether you're looking for information or to get a deeper understanding, the Lent 2021 website has it all, and maybe even something you didn't know you needed. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
To take part in the Lenten initiative, you can head to the website dioceseofbrooklyn.org/Lent 2021. 10 years since the Arab Spring and the Middle East looks very different. Coming up, we have more from the region as promises fall short of expectations.
There are now some big changes to the tablet website. You can get personalized access to the Catholic news you value. Sign up for free at thetablet.org.
Ten years after the Arab Spring, the uprisings that inspired so much promise have fallen short of expectations. But the fight for freedom in the Arab world continues. As the Pope embarks on his trip to Iraq, a message of hope still resonates with the faithful there. It's been a decade since a humble Tunisian street vendor gave birth to a revolution, lighting himself on fire in protest of government corruption, poverty, and a lack of basic human rights.
This revolution will succeed.
His sacrifice sparking demonstrations that quickly spread across the Arab world, toppling governments in Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and Yemen, and triggering deadly civil wars that led to a global humanitarian crisis that's still playing out today.
They called for bread, freedom, and social justice.
Stephen Cook with the Council on Foreign Relations is an expert on the region.
If you think about those 3 things, what people were really asking for was for dignity. And living in these societies where there is corruption, crony capitalism, an arrogance of power, police brutality, were things that people wanted to essentially throw off and build a more just and open society.
Widespread unemployment, especially among young people, pushed activists to rally in the streets and to use social media to spread the word of their discontent.
It was interesting to see how activists and protesters used social media. It's important, though, to recognize that social media was not the beginning and the end of it. These governments had the ability to shut down the internet, and activists then subsequently organized in some old-fashioned ways through the mosque, through word of mouth, through neighborhood, and continued to turn out big crowds in these now very famous public squares.
But 10 years in, unfulfilled promises and voids in leadership have taken their toll.
None of them, save perhaps Tunisia, really did make a transition to more open and democratic societies. The results have been either civil wars or more authoritarianism.
And to the rise of terrorist groups like ISIS, who brutally seized power in parts of Iraq, Libya, and Syria, where Ed Clancy, with Aid to the Church in Need, says the aftermath has been devastating.
Syria has had essentially 10 years of civil war that have come from the Arab Spring. So it's hard to say that many good things have come. Yemen is even worse in that Yemen is really a disaster. It's an economic and political disaster. The people are starving. There's a lot of problems and a lot of violence.
In Iraq, violent extremists smashed centuries of priceless artifacts that bear witness to a history of cohesion among Muslims and Christians, all in an attempt to destroy Iraq's Christian identity.
Islam and Christianity have existed side by side in Iraq and in the region for many generations. One of the terrible things that ISIS did or does is they try to remove or expunge all remnants of history, all cultural significance of people or their opponents.
But the faithful of Karakash in the Nineveh Plains, the heart of Iraq's dwindling Christian community, could not be extinguished. Their beloved cathedral restored after it was nearly wiped out by ISIS, with help from Aid to the Church in Need.
The cathedral was rebuilt, and now it's the pride and joy of the Nineveh Plains. They stand as points of particular contact for the community, but also a source of pride and resonance that the people say when there's a church, they know they can remain.
As Pope Francis spreads his message of unity, hope, and tolerance in Iraq, the significance of his visit has the world watching.
You can't help but think that the Pope's visit will shine a light on, the tenets of Christianity.
Well, it's extraordinary that the pontiff is going to Iraq. I think that it is an important visit for not just Iraqi Christians, but for all Iraqis of goodwill who would like to pull their country back from the brink of collapse.
The ongoing concerns over security and the coronavirus have altered some of Pope Francis's original plans. Sunday's Mass at a soccer stadium in Erbil has been dramatically reduced to 10,000 attendees, down from 30,000. All seats will be assigned and cell phone numbers will be collected in case contact tracing is necessary. The director of projects at Aid to the Church in Need, which provides assistance to the persecuted church around the world, was in Erbil when Christians fled from ISIS in 2014. Now she'll be with Pope Francis during his visit. Regina Lynch joins us now. And Regina, what do you remember from 2014, watching people forced to flee their homes?
It was a very dramatic situation. It was very sad. And I remember in particular elderly people who probably had never left their villages before, sitting bewildered in sports halls in the corner, like, as if they didn't know what was happening. And people were really lost at that moment. It happened so quickly, just overnight, they left their villages.
Ah, so awful. I know Aid to the Church in Need has been instrumental in rebuilding Iraq. To date, about 57% of damaged Christian homes have been repaired in the region, 35% of them thanks to financial help from your organization. Where do you even start when rebuilding these homes and the churches that were destroyed?
Well, the first thing we did was we did several surveys. First of all, we had a survey done of the damaged homes. And the other thing we did was to survey the displaced people who were in Erbil to find out from them how many of them actually wanted to go back. In the beginning, it was a really small percentage, but then it grew. It grew. So with the funding of our benefactors, we started repairing the least damaged houses, then the more damaged houses, and so on. And I think we got to this stage where there are other NGOs involved as well, and we said, okay, now we want to focus on those structures which are really important for the life of the people. And that's the churches, the places to worship, the kindergarten, the community halls, which are so important in the Middle East for weddings and funerals, baptisms for the people to come together, and of course the convents for the sisters and the houses for the priests. And that's where we are today. We are still involved in those houses and those buildings, those constructions.
Wow. And as we mentioned before, you'll be with Pope Francis when he visits the region. It's a much anticipated trip. The blogger who runs the popular Twitter account Mosul Eye had a really moving reaction when he heard the Pope was coming. Let's take a listen.
I couldn't help but cry like a child, because I didn't believe that this is happening.
What do the people of Iraq hope will happen during the Pope's visit and after he leaves?
I think the people are really looking forward to being recognized, first of all, as Christians in Iraq. Very often they don't get that recognition. Really what we hope, one of the things we hope that will come out of this, that there will be a better chance of them having the same citizenship as other members of the Iraqi population. And I think what's really important is they feel that they are part of the universal church, that there are many Christians in other parts of the world who care about them and support them, and that they don't feel so isolated.
All right, Regina Lynch, Director of Projects for Aid to the Church in Need. Best wishes for your upcoming trip.
Thank you very much.
If you'd like to pay for one of Aid to the Church in Need's projects, you can make a donation at churchinneed.org. Currents News and The Tablet will have all-inclusive coverage of the Pope's trip to Iraq beginning this Friday. And Net TV will be airing various parts of the Pope's trip in full. That's also beginning on Friday. You can catch your first glimpses of the Holy Father in Iraq right after Currents News that night. Net TV will show the Pope's meeting with local bishops and priests. Finding love during the pandemic. Coming up, we'll introduce you to the couple that didn't let lockdowns or age get in the way of their marriage. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. A couple in New York isn't letting age or the pandemic stop them from getting married. Joy Morrow Knowlton and John Schultz are proof that love has no limits. The couple is 94 years young and their birthdays only 12 days apart. In the midst of a tough winter, their love blossomed and they got engaged.
Looking forward to getting married to my wonderful woman.
Before planning their wedding, Joy and John said "I do" to receiving their vaccines so they can have a happy and healthy marriage. Congrats to them. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.